Hey, thanks for joining us for this morning manna. Today, I want to talk about our favorite subject, and that is waiting, right? Nobody likes to wait, and it feels like all in this life, in every stage, it feels like there's something we're waiting for. So, my question is, what do we do in the waiting? How do we handle ourselves in those times where we're waiting on God to give us something, whether it's, that family that we've always wanted, whether we're waiting for God to show us that perfect girl, right? Or that promotion that we've been waiting for. What do we do in those times? There's so many stories in the Old Testament that we could look to. Today, I want to look at Daniel in the lion's den. Okay, and this is an interesting story, but let's do some background. So Daniel now has been in exile in Babylon for 3 kings, right? He went through Nebuchadnezzar, his son Belteshazzar, and now he's on Darius, right? It's his 3rd king. It's funny, whenever I was in Sunday school picturing this, it was always Daniel was a young guy. Now looking into it, Daniel was about 80 years old when he was thrown into the lion's den. He was an older guy, but he was still wise. So he's on to his 3rd king, and he's proved himself again. The king has put him above his own governors and satraps as a wise man that he directs. So the king doesn't have to worry about anything, right? He uses Daniel as that. And, gotta love that. So, sorry. Daniel is above those guys. Now, that doesn't sit well with the satraps and with the governors, right? They want to be the king's right-hand man. They want to be the one that the king looks to. So they plot against Daniel, and they're looking in his life. They're looking for something that they can use against him and King Darius. They don't find anything, right? He doesn't do anything. He's an 80-year-old guy. But one thing that they notice every day is that he'll pray 3 times a day to his God. So they convince King Darius to write a law, and at this point, the king has to follow the law. But anyway, they convince him to write a law that anyone who prays to anybody but King Darius is to be thrown into the lion's den. The king likes this, and he agrees to it. Okay, and then at this point, we're going to pick it up in Daniel 6:13, and they have just cornered Daniel into this law, and we're going to see what happens, and we're going to talk about Daniel in waiting. Okay, so it's Daniel 6, verse 13. So they answered and said before the king, "That Daniel, who is one of the captives from Judah, does not show due regard for you, O king, or for the decree that you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day." And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him, and he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. Then these men approached the king and said to the king, "Now, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed." So the king gave command, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. But the king spoke to Daniel, saying, "Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you." Then a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring, with the signets of his lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel might not be changed. So they throw Daniel into the lion den. Now the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting, and no musicians were brought before him, and his sleep went from him. Then the king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of the lions. And when they came to the den, he cried with a lamenting voice to Daniel. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you." Now the king was exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take up Daniel out of the den. So that Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury whatever was found on him, because he believed in his God. And the king gave the command, and they brought those men who accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. So it's interesting in this story because we're talking about waiting, right? And in this, the Bible doesn't really give us a glimpse of Daniel waiting. He waited all night in that lion's den. And I read verse 24 to just kind of show you, those lions were ravenous. They were so hungry that they devoured the children, the wives, and the other satraps and governors before they even hit bottom. Daniel's waiting in this lion's den, waiting for the king to open it up the next morning, early the next morning. What's he doing? I mean, it's interesting that God kind of gives us a picture of what God is doing in this time. We don't know what Daniel's doing in the waiting. I can guarantee you he's praying like he always did, right? He's praying, he's working with God, but God is working on the heart of the king. The king is fasting and praying to a God that he doesn't serve for Daniel, for one of his own. And Daniel's in the lion's den, believing, working with God, knowing that his God will save him. What do you do in the waiting? I mean, there's so many other stories. We could also look at Joseph, right? God actually showed Joseph at the beginning where he was going to be, that his brothers and sisters and his mom and dad would bow to him. But then he was taken as a slave. Then he was thrown into prison. Can you imagine Joseph in the waiting there? Like, God, I know where you have me going, but what are you doing? I know that God has amazing things planned for his children, and sometimes we have to wait. My encouragement for you today is what you do in that waiting. Let's be in our word. Let's be encouraging others. Let's be praying for others, praying for ourselves, praying for our country. Let's be Daniel's and Joseph's, working for what God has. Thank you, guys. Have an awesome day.